While pledging to galvanize international efforts to combat violent extremism, the United States has announced a series of regional summits and events to keep the issue high on the minds of world leaders. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry discussed extremism Thursday in Washington. VOA State Department correspondent Pam Dockins tells us more.
As nations cope with atrocities by the Islamic State, Boko Haram, and similar groups, world leaders are seeking ways to loosen the grip of violent extremists. Nations must work together to stop extremist groups' messages of hate, according to Secretary of State Kerry.
Poisonous ideas can come from almost anywhere, from parents, teachers, friends, preachers, politicians, from the pretty woman on a radical website who lures people, or the man in the next cell who proselytizes while in prison.
One country dealing with extremist violence is Jordan, after Islamic State militants captured one of its pilots in Syria and used social media to show his violent death. The country's Foreign Affairs Minister Nasser Judah says violent extremism has no religious boundaries.
If anyone had any doubt that this is our war as Muslims and our collective war as an international community, that doubt has been removed.
The United States estimates more than 20,000 foreign fighters have joined the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, with at least 3,400 coming from Western nations. To fight the recruiting efforts of extremist groups, the White House is trying to bolster community engagement in building awareness and looking for signs of radicalization. That's especially important for young people who may feel trapped in impoverished communities, says President Obama.
Where there is no order and no path for advancement, where there are no educational opportunities, where there are no ways to support families, and no escape from injustice and the humiliations of corruption. That feeds instability and disorder and makes those communities ripe for extremist recruitment.
The White House says religious leaders are key to combating extremist violence, like last month's deadly attacks in Paris. In a VOA interview, the Mufti of Tirana, Albania, called Islamic State extremist monsters playing on human faith.
I feel pain and am shocked by this barbarity of the 21st century that ISIS is conducting.
President Obama has requested nearly $400 million for the State Department to support counterterrorism partnerships, including new outreach efforts, says National Security Advisor Susan Rice.
The United States will launch new initiatives to build the capacity of partners in North Africa and the Sahel to develop strategies that counter violent extremism. And we're going to track our collective progress with future meetings to make sure our efforts remain linked up.
The U.S. and its global partners plan to assess their progress in the fight against extremism at the UN General Assembly in September. Pam Dockins, VOA News, the State Department.
Well, for more perspective, joining me now on the phone from Minneapolis, Minnesota, is Abdi Warsame. He's a Minneapolis City Council Member. Mr. Warsame, welcome to Africa 54. And I know you did attend the summit here in Washington. You just got back to Minneapolis. What is the message that you brought to the leadership here in Washington?
I mean, the message we brought was that the Somali American community and the Muslim community in the Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota are part of the solution in tackling radical extremism and in making sure that our youths are no longer susceptible to this message and that they don't travel overseas to join these theaters of war.
Now, Councilman, you know, there has always been this talk about the reasons why these young men who have grown up here in the West would go and join extremist organizations. Is it easy, really, to pinpoint what the exact problem is?
I mean, it's not easy. It's a very complicated reality. But I think one of it is lack of education. And in terms of my community, it was a lack of education about where they came from. I mean, the people who are going back are either were born in the United States or they came as children. I mean, the adults are not susceptible to this message because the adults understand the reality where they came from. They understand the brutality of the environment which they fled. They understand the refugee camps. But the young children who were born in America, we did not do a good job of educating them, you know, about their own recent history, the recent history of their families and the tragedies that happened in East Africa. I think that played a part into it. The other part was the intervention of the Ethiopian government and their army in Somalia in 2006 triggered a nationalistic uproar in the Somali diaspora, which was used by groups like Al-Shabaab to entice these youths. So it wasn't a religious sentiment that was at the beginning that was appealing to them, but it was the nationalistic sentiment of defending their people against the encroachment of the Ethiopians.
Now, what is the community like there in Minneapolis doing to ensure that these young kids do not get enticed by those foreign groups that are, want them to kill and die?
Yeah, I mean, the community is doing a great job now. The imams of the mosques, the community leaders, the parents, and the youth leadership have come together and then started to educate the community and educate and tell stories about even those who left behind the tragedies that they faced. And I think putting a human aspect to this reality has helped us. And we've done a much better job than before, and we are aware of the situation, but we do need support and we do need help. And then that's what the message that I brought to Washington, which was we do need support in uplifting the Somali American community in the Twin Cities and developing their human capacity so they become better integrated into the mainstream society and therefore not susceptible to such dangerous messages.
Well, Councilman Warsame, thank you very much. Abdi Warsame is a Minneapolis City Council member.